15-year-old Aisha Carter walked into the precinct to pick up a simple document, but she left humiliated after an officer forcibly cut her hair, mocking her in front of others. Seconds later, her father, a renowned civil rights attorney, burst through the doors, demanding answers. What followed would not only shock the precinct, but also ignite a movement. But let's start from the beginning. Aisha Carter was the embodiment of quiet strength. At just 15, she carried herself with a composure that many adults struggled to maintain. Her tightly coiled hair, styled into an intricate crown of twists, framed her face with elegance and pride, a visible symbol of her identity and self-assurance. Though her outfit was simple, a fitted denim jacket over a pale pink blouse, paired with black leggings and clean white sneakers, there was something striking about the way she stood. Her steady gaze and upright posture conveyed a quiet confidence, even as the precinct buzzed with noise and movement. At the reception desk, Aisha's fingers fidgeted lightly with the strap of her small crossbody bag, a subtle outlet for the tension she kept tightly under control. Inside the bag were the documents her mother had asked her to collect. She had rehearsed what to say, determined to finish her errand quickly and without incident. The precinct felt sterile and unwelcoming, the stark lighting and cold-tiled floors amplifying her unease. Aisha instinctively avoided eye contact, knowing that attention in a place like this was rarely a good thing. But her efforts to remain unnoticed failed. Officer Harris, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a gruff demeanor, spotted her from across the room. His boots echoed against the tile as he approached, his smirk widening with every step. "What are you doing here, kid?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Lost your way to the salon?" Aisha stiffened, her cheeks burning. She straightened her back and met his gaze, her voice calm and steady. "I'm here for my mom's paperwork." "Oh, I see," Harris said mockingly, his tone theatrical. "What's it about? Filing complaints about bad fashion choices?" His words drew a smattering of chuckles from nearby officers. Aisha's fists clenched at her sides, but she forced herself to stay composed. Her silence only seemed to embolden Harris. "We've got rules here about hairstyles. No distractions," he added, his smirk growing. "Maybe I should help fix it for you." Before Aisha could react, Harris reached for a pair of clippers on the nearby desk, the buzz of the room suddenly sharpening into a deafening silence. The sharp buzz of the clippers sliced through the noise of the precinct, instantly commanding attention. Aisha's breath hitched, her pulse pounding in her ears as she instinctively stepped back. Her wide eyes darted to Harris, who was smirking as if he were preparing for a casual prank, not a cruel humiliation. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice quivering with a mix of anger and fear, though she fought to keep it steady. Harris closed the gap between them, the clippers vibrating ominously in his hand. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said, his tone dripping with mockery, his gaze narrowing as he loomed over her. Aisha's back pressed against the desk, leaving her with nowhere to go. Her fingers gripped the edge, desperate for some way to push past him. But before she could react, Harris's rough hand clamped down on her shoulder. The pressure was firm, inescapable, and then the clippers roared to life. A sharp slicing sound echoed as the first chunk of her intricately styled twists tumbled to the floor. Aisha gasped, her free hand flying to her head, too late to stop what had already begun. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice raw and piercing, cutting through the room like a knife. She twisted her body, struggling to break free, but Harris's grip only tightened, his strength overpowering her frantic movements. The laughter that had accompanied his taunts moments before abruptly ceased. The room fell into a stunned silence as her anguished cries rang out. Officers and civilians alike froze mid-motion, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief as they watched the scene unfold. Harris stepped back, finally releasing her, the clippers still humming in his hand. He held them aloft, his smirk unrepentant. "Relax, kid. It'll grow back," he said, his chuckle cold and casual, as though he hadn't just violated her dignity. Aisha bolted for the door, clutching her head with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face, stinging her cheeks as she stumbled into the harsh sunlight outside. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she fumbled for her phone, her shaking fingers barely managing to dial. The moment the call connected, her voice broke. "Dad," she whispered, "please come. I need you." James Carter arrived at the precinct with a purpose that could not be ignored. At over 6 feet tall, with a broad frame and a commanding presence, he exuded an air of authority that silenced the room the moment he stepped inside. His sharp navy blue suit was immaculate, his polished shoes tapping with precision against the tiled floor. The look on his face was as unyielding as stone, his dark eyes burning with focused fury. "Where is Officer Harris?" His deep, resonant voice sliced through the air, stopping conversations mid-sentence. Officers turned their heads, the buzz of casual chatter replaced by tense silence. All eyes locked on the man who now dominated the room, his towering presence making it clear that he would not tolerate any deflection. Harris stepped forward reluctantly, his previous bravado noticeably diminished. His usual smirk wavered as he faced James. "What's the issue?" Harris asked, though his voice lacked the confidence it carried earlier. James didn't move closer at first. Instead, he stood tall, his voice low and controlled, but laced with unmistakable anger. "My daughter was assaulted in your precinct. Do you want to explain yourself, or should I go straight to the press and the district attorney?" Harris shifted on his feet, his smirk now replaced with visible discomfort. "It was a joke," he stammered. "No harm done." That was when James advanced, his steps slow and deliberate, his piercing gaze fixed on Harris, unblinking, unyielding. "A joke?" His voice, now sharp and unforgiving, filled the space. "You forcibly cut a minor's hair, humiliated her in front of others, and now you're trying to downplay it? This isn't a joke. It's an assault. And let me assure you, Officer Harris, this will be the easiest case of misconduct I've ever prosecuted." Behind him, Aisha stepped forward. Her tear-streaked face carried an air of quiet defiance, her hands steady as she lifted her phone. She pressed play. The room was filled with the harsh buzz of clippers and Harris's mocking voice. Gasps rippled through the precinct as officers and civilians alike watched the video. The weight of the evidence hung heavy in the air. Harris's face paled, his silence louder than any defense he could muster. The video went viral, sparking nationwide outrage. Within hours, protesters gathered outside the precinct, holding signs and chanting Aisha's name. News crews swarmed the scene, broadcasting the story to millions. Officer Harris was immediately suspended, and an internal investigation began. At a press conference on the courthouse steps, James stood flanked by Aisha and her mother. "This is about more than my daughter," he declared. "It's about every child who has been mistreated by the very people sworn to protect them." The case went to trial, where Harris was found guilty of misconduct and sentenced to community service. The Carter family also won a civil suit, forcing reforms within the police department. For Aisha, the experience left a deep mark, but it also lit a fire. By year's end, she was speaking at schools and rallies, sharing her story and advocating for justice. Following in her father's footsteps, she turned pain into power, vowing that no other child would endure what she had faced.